Well, ladies and gentlemen, we received huge polling updates today. I'm going to go over those immediately. And then I am going to be looking into the idea that RFK Jr., the independent, could potentially be helping Trump over Biden. Is there actually something to that? I really don't think so right now. It's extremely hard to say. 2024 general election, if Trump is convicted of crimes related to the documents case, would you still vote for him? Trump sitting +8. Those are amazing numbers for him. Certainly, he's not going to win by +8, but still, if you're talking about a margin of error, being +8 in a general election as a Republican is just ridiculously good. If Trump is convicted for inciting the Capitol riots of January 6th, you can see it comes down 8 full points because apparently this poll was done with the same people. That's a big difference now. I don't think Trump's going to have to worry about that because of the way the United States legal system works. He can keep postponing this. Of course, Democrats are going to argue we need transparency. We need these cases to wrap up because the election is happening. Of course, many independents already know that a lot of this prosecution is based on politics. That's why a lot of them don't take it seriously. If Trump is convicted of the Georgia racketeering charges, you can see it's 50-50 there too. So even if the worst case scenario happens for Trump, being 50-50 with Biden going into an election for a conservative would be amazing. Based on recent polling trends, I'm not saying it's going to guarantee Trump a victory, but if you look at how pollsters have done in terms of the general election in both 2016 and 2020, really kind of the ultra modern internet age with Twitter and Instagram and all the social medias, they have vastly underestimated Trump in both 2016 and 2020. Now you could argue and say, well, 2022, the midterms overestimated conservatives. They did worse in terms of the actual results, but I do think the general election and the midterms are different. And this is more of a Trump versus the polls. The polls always seem to underestimate Trump, at least in the last 2 general elections. We've got more national polls. Trump sitting +2. You bring in RFK, Trump is sitting +4. And then you bring in Stein and West, Trump is +5. So those are more good polls for Trump. You can see I guess Trump may be trending down slightly, but I really wouldn't read too much into that considering it is very negligible. It is just only 2 points on that. And then the other major swing state polls, Pennsylvania, Trump +3, Georgia, Trump sitting +3, Arizona, Trump sitting +3, Michigan, Trump +2, North Carolina, Trump +4, and then Florida, Trump +7. They're barely even polling Florida anymore. It is a conservative state. Also North Carolina, I think, based on combining the fact that Trump won it in both 2016 and 2020 with a much worse approval rating going into election day than Hillary and Biden in those respective elections. I think Trump's basically guaranteed to win North Carolina unless something crazy happens. I know you could argue he barely won it by less than 3 points in both 2016 and 2020, but other polling dynamics have changed to the point where I'd be very surprised if Trump lost North Carolina. Michigan's been one that's surprised me a lot recently with, some very positive Trump polls where he's up like 4 or 5, being up 2, that's within the margin of error. So that, to me, that's basically tied. Arizona certainly seems to be trending Trump's way, just like Nevada. Pennsylvania is basically tied at this point. Georgia, I would say, is a Trump lean as well. A few articles I wanted to touch on really quickly. How about the Rolling Stone coming out? Exclusive article. Biden building a superstructure to stop Trump from stealing the election. Trump and his allies have been working for years to pre-rig the 2024 election. Here's how Team Biden is planning to fight them. So this article basically concedes that, if Biden wins the election in 2024, it's going to be by an extremely razor-thin margin. I mean, look at 2020 and the advantage that Biden had in the polls going into the election and the fact that he won it by de facto 40K votes in several very important swing states, barely winning Pennsylvania, Georgia, Michigan, Wisconsin, all of them being extremely close. You look at the polls and how they've shifted going into this election. The Democrats have conceded. Biden, even though he's an incumbent, even though they've said Trump is this terrible fascist, racist, anti-democracy. They've conceded that if Biden wins, it's not going to be a landslide. It's going to be probably even somehow closer than the 2020 election. Now, when it comes to the idea, they're already saying that, well, Trump is going to say it's rigged again. I think a lot of that has to do with the situation in 2024. Because you can sit there and they've argued that, well, Trump's this big baby. He couldn't accept an election defeat in 2020, so he made up voter fraud. The problem with that argument that the Democrats use is they've already admitted, and it's already come out, that they did meddle in the election with the Hunter Biden story and the October surprise. Now, I'm not going to say that, oh, for sure there was voter fraud and that the Democrats cheated to win in 2020. But what I am going to say is all of these people stomped around for 4 years, acted like Trump was Hitler, and then when they got accused of voter fraud for trying to keep out the supposed Hitler of office in 2020, they acted like it was the most ridiculous accusation in history. Like, if you genuinely believe that Trump is a threat to democracy and is an existential threat, you probably would try and keep him out of office any means necessary. And then it adds to the fact that 2020 was, for all intensive purposes, a complete shit show with the crazy amount of mail-in. And I'm not saying, oh, the mail-in leads to, for sure, voter fraud, but there's a higher percent chance of it. Obviously, when you're getting votes from different places, it's easier to meddle with something like that. So their entire argument about Trump being this big bad baby, he can't accept defeat, he has to make up voter fraud, it would have some legitimacy if the Hunter Biden thing didn't come out to where they got exposed for silencing that story because they knew it would hurt Joe Biden. And this is another thing that Democrats always get wrong. It really doesn't matter if the Hunter Biden corruption would have changed the election. It's the fact that big tech, social media, they meddled in it and they silenced the story as a way to help one political side over the other. That cannot happen. You can't be silencing things like that, especially right before the election. And that was obviously a code red for them that they had to do because they thought it possibly would have hurt Joe Biden's potential chances of being elected. And I think we saw with how close the vote was in many of those swing states, it could have potentially changed it. I'm not going to sit here and argue and say, oh, if they wouldn't have silenced it at all, it for sure would have changed it, because we just don't know that. But it's really not, that doesn't even really matter. It's the action that was made to silence it that was the catastrophic. You want to talk about anti-democracy, my goodness, and how about the hypocrisy going back to 2016 to 2018, stomping and crying and saying that Russia, through technology and social media, colluded to make sure that Trump was elected, basically insinuating that Russia was using technology as a way to influence the election. They did that in 2020. It is just so crazy. And then we've got this, what the polls say today, RFK Jr. now hurting Biden, helping Trump. I believe this is from a few maybe swing states that show if you just match up Trump and Biden, you know, Trump's up by 2, up by 3, whatever. But if you bring in RFK Jr., it expands Trump's lead a little bit. Now, me personally, I don't think we can sit here and say, oh, for sure, if RFK Jr., you know, is still going to be in the race and be on the ballot on all 50 states, he's going to help Trump and he's going to hurt Biden. It's impossible to say. I think RFK Jr.'s done a really good job of running as pure of an independent campaign as you can here in America in 2024. The question is, because these states are going to be very likely be very close. Now, you could argue maybe Trump will win Pennsylvania by 3 or 4 points because that's what it's looking right now. But many of these states we're expecting to be close. RFK Jr. will have a significant impact. And who does he hurt and help more? Yes, technically the recent polling will say he slightly hurts Biden more. If you guys remember when RFK Jr. came out and ran, the immediate smear campaign against him was that he was an anti-vaxxer, and that was an obvious attempt by the mainstream media to pit Democrats against RFK Jr. This guy's a loon, he's a wacko, he's an anti-vaxxer, don't vote for him. And maybe that would also help RFK Jr. get some conservative support, which I'm sure many of these mainstream media sites would love because it would split the vote between RFK Jr. and Trump. We're really not seeing that happen. The entire anti-vax narrative's been completely blown to smithereens, especially recently. And now it seems like RFK Jr. is much more of an independent, and maybe he will help Trump. But I think the polling is so close, you can't say well, without RFK, Trump is up by 2, but with RFK, now Trump is up by 9. That's not what the polling is showing. It's showing like a 1 or 2 point advantage for Trump, which is well within the margin for error, especially multiple months before the election. So I wouldn't say for sure RFK Jr. is helping or hurting Trump. That speaks to RFK Jr. truly running an independent campaign. But I think the bottom line is when it comes to these polls, I was expecting a bit of a shift by this point to kind of swing more pro Biden, and we're just not seeing it. Now, I guess you could still say, look, we haven't even reached the summer. Maybe that's when you'll start seeing the narrative. The polls will get tighter. The general election polls will be maybe Biden +1, +2, which is basically the popular vote. And you would expect Biden to win the popular vote pretty much no matter what, although I don't know based off the recent stuff. But maybe it swings soon. I've just been doing a lot of these videos. I've been doing predictions now for 6-7 months. It's basically been the exact same thing. Whether there's things coming out about Trump, originally it was, can Trump even win the Republican primary? Because obviously the establishment changed their strategy this year, like we knew they would, versus 2016 when all of the candidates stayed in the race and split the vote, which enabled Trump to win. DeSantis immediately drops out. It basically becomes Nikki Haley versus Trump from the onset after Iowa, and Trump just crushes her anyways because he's in total control of this party. So we're not seeing any type of polling shift, at least at this point. Everything is aligning to where Trump has a better approval rating. Trump, believe it or not, is winning the general election popular vote polls, whether with RFK or without him, and Trump is leading basically every swing state, or it's extremely close, like 50-50. Right now, everything's aligning for Trump. It can certainly change, but for Biden to get the polls in a better place, he has to improve his public image, because the other issue for Biden is the vice president situation and the fact that Biden right now is very unlikable. And on top of that, there's questions on him even being capable of being a president over the next 4 years. And that then forces Americans to think, well, Kamala Harris is the VP. Do we really want her to be the president if Biden has to step down, let's just say hypothetically in 2025 or 2026? Based off of polling, Americans don't like Kamala. They actually think she's worse than Biden. So it's not a good situation for Biden. He has to come out and do some type of press conferences or something, because the idea that hiding is going to work in 2024, listen, hiding can work when you fearmonger against your opponent and you've got a better approval rating. Sure, it can work then, just like in 2020. And you also had the excuse of, oh, it's the pandemic. I'm not going to go out and do rallies. I'm going to get sick. We've got a terrible virus going around. You really don't have that excuse now. So Biden has to prove to the American people that he can lead over the next 4 years and really come out and take questions from the media if he wants to improve his public image and improve his approval rating, which would improve his polls overall. Right now, none of that is happening, so Trump continues, and it's been the exact same thing for 7 or 8 months. I think Trump's actually gone up even more now recently to where he leads all the swing states, he leads the general election, but we will see. Either way, guys, that is going to do it for this video. Make sure you follow me on X. Link to that's always in the description.